we're in the business of showing people what is interesting that they never pay attention to.
Yes.
And, part of that is the human condition. When, you know, I always tell my students, you must become as little children to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, if you think of the way an infant sees the world, it doesn't see, it sees this moving mosaic of shapes and values and colors. And then it learns over time that there's this recurring pattern of shapes, values, and colors that when it's distressed, this pattern comes and, changes its diaper or gives it food or burps it or whatever, just holds it. And after a while, it learns a name for that and it calls it mom. And then it starts to learn names for other things. Where's your nose? Touch mommy's nose. Where's your ear? And so at about the age of 1.5, we start to string them together and make sentences. No nap, little short sentences, more food, whatever. And the problem for artists is that once the verbalization machine starts at 1.5 years, it never shuts up. And then we just talk to ourselves all the time. And so we can't, people always say, paint what you see. But what people do is they look at something and what am I seeing? I'm seeing a red ball. It's a red ball. I know it's red. And so it must all be red. And some parts of it are dark because I learned about value to make shadow shape. So I'm going to make it a darker red. Well, is it a red ball under a warm light or a cool light? Do you have 2 light sources? What if it weren't red?
Yeah.
What if it were violet? If it's under a blue light, maybe it's violet, but you still perceive it as red because you're under that cool light too. What if, so our perception is filtered through all of this verbal gobbledygook that's going on that we can't shut off. And so art and music are basically language systems to show people something that their language system has shut out. Because the problem is, once we start with all of these sentences, we no longer pay attention to the real world and pay attention to what's in our heads, which is very efficient for processing information.
Yeah.
You can manipulate these verbal symbols much more quickly than you can actually walk across the veldt to see if that's a lion in the bush or not, which probably wasn't a successful exercise anyway. But that's great for manipulating abstractions of large amounts of data, but it's terrible for showing somebody else the beauty of a sunset.
Exactly.
I guess you could do modern art and you could have a black canvas and with a white letter that said sunset and call it sunset.
Yeah.
And then have an explanation of why it was violating the paternalistic hierarchy of previous whatever. You'd have to come up with a bunch of extensive verbalization to explain that to other people who couldn't tell what from your work.